Demons? A friend of mine, we'll call her Joan, used to be a nun, and both before and after she was a nun, Joan was a nurse. Her nursing subspecialty for many years was pediatric psychiatry. She worked for one rather large hospital for many years, helping children who'd been sectioned and transferred from the emergency room. She said the thing that bothered her most, the one she could never stop thinking about, was a 7-year-old boy who was brought in one evening. For context, this all happened after Joan had ceased being a nun. All Joan knew about this boy was that he was having visual and auditory hallucinations and that the boy had been violent, hitting, punching, biting, spitting, thrashing, screaming obscenities, etc., toward his primary caretakers, and it had all happened very suddenly, like a switch had gone off in his brain. His family were baffled, and called 911 to get him in to be evaluated emergently. Joan said it always bothered her to see kids in 5-point restraints, but it had to happen sometimes. This little boy was wheeled in, so small on a big bed. His eyes would roll back in his head and he would scream and start flinging insults at the doctors, transporters, nurses, anyone in the room. He thrashed against his restraints. A doctor asked Joan to go to the head of the bed and help hold him down so that he could be sedated. Joan did as she was told, and the drugs took effect quickly. As she held the boy's shoulders, the boy's eyes closed and he stopped fighting. Joan said a prayer in her mind, as was her habit, for the boy's quick recovery. It was a leftover from her time as a nun. These days, she just never said it aloud. A moment after she started it, though, the boy's eyes quickly opened. He stared right at Joan and said, "You stop that right now. Your God has no place here." Then his eyes closed, and he fell unconscious. To say Joan was shocked would be an understatement. The boy ended up with them for a few days, pending transfer. At Joan's hospital, no one could be transferred without a clear diagnosis, an abatement of acute symptoms. In this kid's case, he'd have to be non-violent, and some sort of treatment plan in place, even if it was a rudimentary one. Joan went to see him again on day 3 and found him sitting in his room, drawing and coloring with crayons. The boy seemed completely different, more like the kid his family said he was, instead of the child in crisis he'd been when she last saw him. Joan said he looked good, but she got the creeps looking in his room at him, and chalked it up to their last encounter. Joan introduced herself, but the boy said, "I know just who you are. He doesn't like you." Joan asked who the boy meant, and he said, "You're very nice, but you're not going to be able to help me, you know." Joan asked again, who he was that didn't like her, and also why he couldn't be helped. The boy said, "I see them, you know. Demons. They have me, miss. They're everywhere. There's one in the room. He doesn't like you. He knows you're good. He hates your prayers. I'm going to hell. No one can save me. You can't help me." Now, Joan had been a nun in the past. To Joan, demons were real, but she was also a realist. Mental illness wasn't the work of Satan. It is a chemical imbalance in the brain. Joan listened to the boy and told him that she'd really like to try to help him, if he'd let her. Then she asked if there was a demon in the room, right now. The boy nodded. Joan asked where, intending to show him that he was wrong. "He's right behind you, miss," the boy answered, looking over her left shoulder. "They have me. You can't save me," he repeated, and he seemed so sad. Joan said every hair on the back of her neck stood up, and she looked over his left shoulder. Nothing. She saw nothing. She resisted praying in her mind, just in case it set the boy off again. Joan reported her interaction with the boy to his doctors. She said they upped his dosage of antipsychotics. He was in an inpatient facility within a day of their final encounter. Joan never saw him again. Joan said that she never could get that boy out of her mind. Demons. She wondered for years if he was alright, or if they really had gotten him.